Добрый день, уважаемые участники.
Good afternoon, dear participants of our discussion. Moscow time is 12:43, and we suggest to start our panel discussion. I'm Alexey Shaposhnikov, a member of Moscow State Duma, and I'm head of this session. I'm going to moderate this session. Well, I would like to speak what kind of goals we have. I will specify these goals, and number one is to discuss the stages of development of infrastructure and healthcare, what kind of advantages and disadvantages of enlargement we have, possibilities of specializations, getting clinical results for enlargement of medical organizations. Target number one, to discuss optimal infrastructure is the basement of provision for comprehensive approach to the patient, modern IT solutions, describe cooperation of a doctor and the patients, and also find solutions to provide for comprehensive approach and change in the role of the patients, and discuss how the state and the government should discuss the issues of optimal arrangement of medical infrastructure and medical institutions. Let me introduce the participants of today's plenary discussion. The first I would like to introduce is Ekaterina Timofeyeva, partner and managing director, BCG, head of healthcare practice, who is going to represent this research regarding the growth of concentration of medical assistance in cities of the world. I would like to introduce Graham Ritchie, National Service of Healthcare of Great Britain, and his theme was related how we understood the enlargement of medical institutions, what is traditional model of healthcare, and what kind of results were reached. Vladimir Starodubtsev, academician of Russian Academy of Sciences, his comments will be related to the theme of enlargement of medical institutions. Denis Nikolaevich Prochenko, chief doctor of hospital number 40, chief specialist on anesthesiology and reanimology, he will speak about working with populations, about provision of quality of medical assistance, and actually he will speak how his hospital is growing and moving to a new territory. I think that the story will be mostly related to that. Natalia Nikolaevna Kuzenkova, chief doctor of polyclinics number 68, about working with population at arrangement assistance around the patients and rearrangement of the structure of the clinic itself. Oksana Borisovna Melnikova, Minister of Healthcare of Perm region, will speak about results of the processes of enlargement. Marat Muhammadiev, Chief Doctor of big ambulance Nabережные Челны, he will speak about his experience of one of the most front-end hospitals, about the role of provision of medical assistance and what kind of role a hospital can have in the future. Lenara Ivanova, Deputy Prime Minister of Bashkortostan Republic, Government Minister of Family, Labor and Social Protection of Population of the Republic. Also the results of the processes of enlargement. Alexey Dobrovolsky, Head of Director of Healthcare of Khanty-Mansiysk Autonomous Region, also results of enlargement processes. And our panel discussion will be completed by Alexey Shagunin, member correspondent of Russian Academy of Science, Doctor of Medicine, Professor, Chief Staff Specialist of Healthcare in Moscow, and the Chief Doctor of Botkin Hospital. Dear friends, now we move on to the speakers. Ekaterina, you have the first floor. Dear colleagues, I have to strictly follow the agenda. Every speaker has no longer than 8 minutes, and we'll fix the time.
Добрый день, коллеги.
Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Those who participated in the plenary session, I think that you also saw a part of the materials that I'm going to present, and that is why I will just go quickly through that. So we conducted a study of global trends in the sphere of healthcare development in 23 cities, including Moscow. And one of the trends that we witnessed is changes of the format as to actually how medical assistance is provided. And in this sense, I would like to talk about the so-called health factories. But what stands for this term, health factory? Well, when we use this term, probably each of you thinks about a certain things. So, I mean, of course, we talk about consolidation of different medical establishments and also their scaling up in order to achieve better results in terms of medical assistance. This is one of the trends that can also seen all around the world, and one of the trends that is now being developed in Moscow as well. But another important thing that also will be referred to as health factor of the future is the integration of medical establishment and new formats for rendering medical assistance, where we could create the so-called seamless virtual network that would be meant and developed specifically for the patients. And I would like to extrapolate a little bit more on those trends. First of all, we can see that almost 78% of the big cities that we think they follow these trends, and they tend to unite different, for example, establishments and hospitals. They want to boost performance and optimize medical expenses. But also another important thing is improvement and boosting the results of medical help. We understand that we need to train our specialists, improve their knowledge, and also enlarge their field of expertise and focus on other factors in order to improve the outcome of the treatment. And very often the result of the consolidation of such a patient flow within this medical establishment help us to create special centers of competences. Very often we asked what actually you more often see. Do you mostly think high profile medical establishment with a wide focus, or specialized hospitals? But I should say that all those centers of competence, they can have different forms in both mentioned above. And one of the examples that you know, for example, the Martini Clinic, that's only work with prostate cancer, but at the same time they are associated with the University Clinic of Hamburg, and they also have the biggest patient flow in the world. It means that they perform the biggest number of operations and work with the biggest number of these cases. And it leads to very good outcomes and performance and less number of complications. The figures that you can see on the slide tell us that compared to other clinics in Germany, for example, the decreased number of complications, as for example, this constipation is 7 times low. And this trend will be there in the future, because we are getting a new, more and more new formats. During the plenary sessions, we mentioned that patients they are playing a more and more active role in the whole domain, and they also perform a lot of things at home on their own. For example, we talk about some basic tests, etc. They keep track of their health. They also now more involved in, for example, outpatient assistance, community care, telemedicine, other things that they are more involved in this. We also can establish a certain link between the patients and the doctor, where the patient doesn't have to go physically to a hospital. And it leads to the fact that we need to integrate all those formats in one single approach. And in this case, it allows us to create the so-called virtual health factories around patients in order to make it feasible Well, in fact, one of the most frequent questions that we have is that, like, of course, it's really nice, but how it can be applied in practice? One of the most frequent questions, has it been applied anywhere else? Of course, to do that, we need a number of things in place to achieve that goal. Of course, we need one unified digital contour or a loop, and here we should say that digital medical history plays a crucial role. We see that Moscow, in fact, is really gaining momentum and keeps pace with this trend, and we're trying to create this unified digital contour around the patient. But in fact, many cities and regions, they decided to go further than that and say that this kind of digital contour also needs to be available for all those formats where medical assistance is rendered. It means that patients must be able to upload their information on their own, and also telemedicine must be linked to this digital loop, and all the players must be able to see all the information using one single source. And the second important condition is the so-called institute coordinator for treatment or treatment coordinator. We can see different solutions all around the world as to who actually can play this role, and there are different approaches to that, and also interpretation of this term and this role. One of the examples to make it clear for you, for example, Kaiser Permanent System that was presented by the United States and applied in 8 states and different hospital. They have there over 12 million patients, and every patient has a certain coordinator responsible for this patient. And the main role of the coordinator is to keep track of the whole path, medical path of the patient, starting from diagnosis up to some other stages, treatment, all the processes that the patient is exposed to. In Singapore, I will talk a little bit more about that, but in Singapore, the Minister of Health announced last year that they have a plan to also introduce this role, because at the state level they want to have this enclosed treatment contour for patients in different diverse medical establishments. They want to establish an institute of coordinators that could perform this kind of function so that the patient doesn't get lost within the whole system. Important components of integrated assistance is interdisciplinary approach. Very often we say that what could be there, I mean, anything new within this interdisciplinary approach. It is also intensively applied in Russia. You have only 1 minute left. Okay, just to be as brief as possible. So we have a new focus of interdisciplinary approach related to the final outcome. So the whole team should be focused on that, and at the same time, interdisciplinary approach can bring together different formats and different approaches. Okay, coming back to the example of Singapore, where, for example, for aged people specifically, they create a special approach within the community care. They also have special people in place to be responsible for them and to monitor their treatment. But it can be done without changes in the budgetary spending. So payment should be made for some kind of results, real deals that's achieved in a positive way. I gave you an example of Kaiser and Singapore. I think that I will not go deeper into details, and instead I will just try to summarize what's kind of healthcare we could have in future. So of course we will be changing our medical establishment in order to improve our performance. We'll be developing integrated virtual systems, and we went through the factors that we need to have in place to achieve this goal. And of course, at the end of the day, it will help us to really develop our medical system around patients with a special focus on the patient. We are very sorry that we didn't have the time to go through till the end of the presentation. I would like to ask the audience, can you hear us perfectly well? Okay, so then the floor is given to Graham Reach, top manager, National Healthcare System in Great Britain. Also, no more than 8 minutes.
Thank you very much. My apologies, my Russian is very poor, so I hope to speak only in English. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today. Just to set the scene, I work in the UK where most of the healthcare is paid for by the taxpayer through the National Health Service. Sorry. Can you hear me? Yep. So I work in the UK where most of the healthcare is paid for by the taxpayer through the National Health Service. Care is commissioned or purchased locally for a local population through the local hospitals. Generally it's paid for by volume, so the more work hospitals do, the more they receive in terms of payment, with a small percentage of payment based on quality. All patients are registered with general practitioners. Okay. So hopefully this is slightly better. Generally the quality of primary care is very good in the UK, and most of the specialist healthcare is provided by state-owned hospitals. These hospitals are part of NHS trusts overseen by a local board and chief executive. Over 200 trusts cover the country. I've been a chief executive of one of those trusts that managed 9 hospitals in one of the regional cities. So I've managed community and primary care services and very specialist services. There are also private clinics and private hospitals, most of which do some NHS paid work. Over the years, we've seen more and more subspecialization of hospital specialties. We know that larger hospitals are more efficient when looked at a specialty level. From economies of scale, larger accident and emergency departments cost less to run per patient, and economies of scope when all surgical departments are sited together and share common expensive equipment. We also know that increased volume improves outcomes. I was interested to learn that when Denmark reduced the number of hospitals performing colorectal cancer nationally, the rate of 30-day post-operative mortality fell from 7% to under 3%. The Martini Clinic, as we've already heard, does more than 2,200 prostatectomies every year, more than any other institution in the world. Its rate of incontinence within 1 year is 1/6 of the average German hospital. So that's a rate of 7% instead of the average of 43%. And the other side effects are also much lower. So if we took that Martini Clinic approach in the UK, we could reduce our number of centres that provide prostate surgery from 92 down to 15, and still 90% of the population would still be within an hour's travel time from those 15 centres. And if you took the same volumes, 2,200 prostatectomies, it could be even less. So we've seen over the last few years in the UK an increasing consolidation of hospital facilities driven by a number of factors. We don't have enough financial resources to support all of the smaller hospitals to have a broad range of specialties, and many hospitals are overspending. There's a shortage of trained staff, and smaller units often find it difficult to recruit given their relative isolation, lack of education and research activity. We also have quite a tough national regulator that comes in and inspects all hospitals, and it tends to find deficits in the care of smaller hospitals. So they're more likely to be found to be inadequate or requiring improvement. And we know that the data which is published on outcomes shows that the hospitals doing less numbers of procedures generally have less good outcomes. driven by smaller volumes of procedures per specialist. So if you stand back and look at the problem from afar, it seems simple.
Если вы рассмотрите проблему,
And everyone will be happy. Unfortunately, life is not quite so simple. New buildings take a long time and cost a lot of money. Clinicians and patients and managers are very attached to their own particular institution and are worried about having to travel further for work. Managers are worried about giving up specialties or beds to other hospitals, fearing in some way that their status and privilege is somehow damaged by doing so. So how has the UK approached the issue? In a number of ways. Planning for services for rarer or specialist diseases is done nationally and regionally. Standards have been issued, so each service either has to improve or stop providing the service. And standards might include, say, access to intensive care beds. So that's one method. A second method is large cities have reduced the number of centres for single particular diseases in a planned way across the city. We've heard that about London. London has dropped the number of centres that receive people with acute strokes from 32 down to 8. Approximately 100 lives per year are saved as a consequence of that. And also length of stay for people with stroke has reduced, and so the costs have fallen. Some cities organise clinical reconfiguration between hospitals. In my city in Bristol, we did this with the two major hospitals swapping services. So one hospital may give up ear, nose and throat surgery, another might give up breast surgery or vascular surgery, and so you then get concentration of specialties across two different sites. Where hospitals are reluctant to cooperate, then the NHS has resorted to sharing leadership. So we'll say, okay, these two hospitals need to have the same chairman or chairperson, and they need to have the same chief executive, and suddenly the two hospitals start to cooperate. Also, we have the situation where there may be a very well-run and managed hospital which has got high quality and relatively low cost next door to a poorly performing one, and the NHS has then asked the well-run hospital to also run the neighbouring poorly performing hospital. And then finally, as we've heard in the previous presentation, we're now pursuing a policy of integrating care between hospitals and community facilities, but also between commissioners of healthcare and providers of healthcare, and including primary care in that. And the hope is that with better care coordination, there will be less waste from duplication. So what do we need to have in place for proper consolidation, rapid consolidation? I think there are 6 things, just to finish. 6 things. Greater transparency on outcomes. Then it's clear who's doing well and who's not doing well. Excellent clinical engagement. So it's important to engage the senior clinical leaders in reconfiguring care. They're often the ones with the access to the evidence around benefits of doing so, and they're also very influential within the hospital environment. A culture of collaboration, not competition between hospitals. Financial incentives for working together. That might be bundled payments or some other way of encouraging hospitals to work together. Great electronic patient records that link between hospitals and community and primary care. And finally, shared governance, some way of coordinating all of the activity in order to make it happen. This type of activity is complex, it takes time and it takes engagement, but we think it provides real benefit to the patients. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Well, I would like to address to you with some request. You know that in our country now we have a kind of changes of position, and at 2 p.m. I have to be in a State Duma where we will have confirmed the Prime Minister. Please allow me to go, and if you do not mind, I would like to introduce my colleague who is Deputy of Moscow City Duma, Head of Commission on Healthcare and Public Health Protection, Kartavtseva Larisa, Well, as usually, this fragile lady will have to bear this mission to moderate this plenary discussion. Larissa Ruslanovna, please control the situation. Thank you, Alexey Valeryevich. Thank you very much. All the best to you. We are waiting for good news, and I'm firmly convinced we'll get this good news. About new Prime Minister, and he has huge task to do. Good afternoon, dear friends, dear colleagues. We continue our discussion, and today, we have already listened to Ekaterina and to Mr. Graham. They have already said, how many countries already using this practice, and they have experience to illustrate that with one institution in one city, what can be achieved. And now I would like to speak about this enlargement. First of all, I would like to give the floor to you. What is your opinion, Vladimir Ivanovich? Because it's very important and very interesting. Thank you. Well, I will start back in the second half of 80s of the previous century, the Soviet Union was visited by a delegation from England who were watching the arrangement of medical assistance, medical care in Russia. We got new mechanism of arrangement, and then we got functional system in Great Britain, which they are really proud of and which is of a state character. And this is kind of a deviation, small deviation. And the second thing I would like to say that the name new factory and so on and so forth, well, comprehensive medical institutions existed a long time ago, and here I would like to speak about a couple of aspects. Number one, to what extent it is necessary to have a concentration of medical services in this or that legal body, or let us say a hospital, and so on and so forth. And here we need to consider that Moscow is a special subject of the Russian Federation, and a little bit later I will speculate about peculiarities which we imported from the Soviet times as related to healthcare. And of course, concentration in large medical institutions, whatever you call them, is truly necessary, and it's absolutely right, because possibilities for small organizations to be competitive are increasing with the opportunity of better attraction of resources which are necessary to provide high qualified medical care. And here the institution I'm heading collects statistics around Russia and statistics about Moscow, and we consider trend for the last years which we got in Moscow, and they prove that at the increasing opportunities and the tempos of increase of indicators are considerable, and the mortality rate from heart attack and application of modern methods for heart attack treatments and delivery of the patients with heart attacks up to the surgery. And this proves that indicators improved by 50%, and there is no bad news here. So the trends are positive, and let's call it a fabrics. And the second aspect I would like to speak about it, and I said about the peculiarities of Soviet Union, Moscow and Leningrad at this time, and the polyclinics were divided from hospitals. They were totally independent, and today they are still independent. When everywhere in Russia they were united into the same entity, central hospital or central polyclinics. And here are positive and negative things about this. From the point of view of patients, well, I do not see any problem if the roadmap is arranged properly. When a patient comes to primary part, when they come to negative to some center at high level of diagnosis, then he comes to hospital, and it doesn't take lots of time. For Moscow, it should take hours or days because infrastructure is very well developed here, and it is now as in the subjects with low population density. But another aspect, which is related to training of specialists and qualification of doctors, really needs considerable reconsideration. I would put it like this. This is a problematic issue because a doctor working in polyclinics, well, I mean not specialists, but I mean general practitioners or pediatricians. I mean narrow specializations, like a doctor working only on polyclinics, not in hospital, cannot be considered complete urologist, otolaryngologist, and so on and so forth. He should be in the environment which allows him to perfect himself as a specialist. And here, when we have a unification of hospital and polyclinics, well, there the possibilities for growth are present, and even general practitioner working in his place should have 2 duties a month in the hospital, and it would help to improve qualifications of the doctors. And today, narrow specializations in polyclinics do not have the amount of knowledge which is necessary for proper consultation, and the problem is still here. And that was an institution where at some point that should be related to polyclinics. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Vladimir Ivanovich. And actually, I should say that enlargement is a correct trend, and we are moving towards a right direction. And today at the plenary session you could hear and you could see when a lot was said about Moscow and how capital healthcare system is developing. And the main thing is that we spoke about a city as an organism, and the main part is heart, and the heart is related to people. And when we offer something to the population, of course we ask something and we are open, we have a discussion with them. And it's not by chance that Denis Nikolaevich, who actually is in the center of these events, and this we have a growing of a hospital, its expansion, its reorganization, and we spend lots of time together discussing these things with the people. And now I would like to ask him to share this experience. Thank you, Larissa Ruslanovna. Good afternoon, honorable colleagues. I will follow the theme of our symposium, and I will speak about fabrics of health, which was created by government of Moscow. This is hospital number 40 and Department of Healthcare. Following modern trends, that is enlargement, and they have performed this, adding the territory in a hospital in Kommunarka district to hospital number 40, having preserved and enlarging the team. And we clearly understand that this factory of health, as you can see the slide, is very hard to be arranged inside a city. 13.5 hectares, 160,000 of square meters, united by most modern solutions, infrastructural solutions as well. All this can be implemented only at new territories within a short term period of time. And on 13th of March we'll get the first patient. And what do we get with this enlargement? Number one, we get lots of different profiles which are very important to be united in the same point, considering the complexity of our patients, considering the pathology they have. And we understand that no matter what we're doing with our patient, whether we work with acute coronary syndrome or deal with the cancer problem, they're in the same infrastructure, in the same hands, in the same identity, in the same team, which is united by the same target, by the same tasks and the same values. And at the same time, we should understand that unifying hospitals and territories which are located at different parts of Moscow, we have made an analysis, and it's quite clear that we provide assistance within the frames of emergency and planned care. So speaking about emergency care, We understand the anxiety of citizens of north-western district of Moscow. We have the hospitals of war veterans where they have all the necessary infrastructures for providing emergency assistance, and emergency assistance in the territory of Kommunarka will be provided for the dwellers of southern and southern western administrative districts. And opening and enlargement of such a huge cluster, of course, will provide changes to routing of patients and to this ecosystem of healthcare in our city. At the same time, planned medical care with all the modern technologies which are implemented in a new hospital can be provided regardless of the territorial belonging of a patient. I would like to emphasize once again that for the citizens of northwestern administrative district, they still have the same polyclinics which are very well known in this audience, which are located very close, either in the same district or close to this district. And this kind of polyclinics are for Botkina Clinic hospitals is one of the largest ones, and Yermeshantsev Hospital as well. Thus, the enlargement that is implemented in our health factory is seen by 8 key positions that I have shown at the slide. Yes, this is availability. This is seamlessness of giving the patient from a doctor's council from hospital to polyclinic. So this is the same team, and these are solutions that are working at the same industry. So this is the system program. This is the same infrastructure that helps us to exchange data wherever we are at present time. It's very important to have a unified culture in this huge factory of health, unified approach to communication with the patients, and multidisciplinary kind which helps to provide help to a patient regardless of diversity of different pathologies he has. And in conclusion, I would like to say, I would like to use this opportunity to say thank you to Larisa Ruslanovna, because working with population is done as traditional meetings, and implementing these changes and informing population, we use the model that exists in the city. First of all, this is municipal deputies, which we meet with, explain modern trends, convince why this enlargement should happen, why it's impossible to bring the magnetic resonance tomography into every house. This is the very working group which is headed by Larisa Ruslanovna. These are days of open doors, which are regularly done in the system of city healthcare. This is the hospital where we digitalize all our meetings, and where we provide the availability for anyone, and what is happening at working groups. And of course, this is an information booklet. This is our reaction from the population request to provide this information, and we have elaborated this paper, and we share it now. This is all I wanted to say. Denis Nikolaevich, thank you very much. You got only 5 minutes, and as we have time, everybody has some special time dedicated to this. I would like to say, for those who are present here at our discussion at this platform, first of all, we are going to speak, we are going to exchange experience, we are going to discuss the achievements of Moscow, but still we have questions, and you know that still population, no matter how hard we work with them, but practically and experimentally we can see that now we work actively, and still they have questions. Still they do not understand why it is needed, what for. So now our specialists, we see the experience and practice of our front-end regions, which we discussed at plenary session, and maybe you would have kind of offers or questions. Maybe you will offer us something, because here we have not only specialists, but here we also have Muscovites and guests of the capital, and that is why I would like you to get actively involved, and maybe you would tell us something. It's very important. And now I would like to speak about polyclinics to primary link. It was mentioned that this is an important direction, and we have great expectations to that. We have good changes. And Natalia Nikolaevna, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Larisa Ruslanovna. Well, within the recent time, Moscow polyclinics, of course, saw considerable changes. And I believe that at present there is no need to repeat about the global tasks that are on primary medical assistance. Of course, this is a medical examination which we have done all the summer, including parts of Moscow. This is early diagnosis, this is oncoscreenings, this is fighting with cardiovascular diseases, and all that is related to Moscow polyclinics. Characterizing the polyclinics where I work in, I should say that we are in a historically complicated region of Moscow. This is quite an old district, 5 buildings in the central district, and now central building is quite a new one with the elements of Moscow standards of polyclinics. However, it's not everywhere in the same way. From 2013, as you know, Moscow polyclinics consist of one head building and attached affiliated structures. I have 5 of those. And the head building, the main building, and well, thank you very much. I don't know which screen to watch. Well, main building is totally equipped with magnetic resonance tomographers, computer tomographer, video gastro and colonoscopy equipment. But when we have lots of affiliated structures, it's sort of the question that we need to have unification. There should be business model to work in a unified way. We understand perfectly well that our polyclinics should be financially successful. We understand that we should pay good salary to our employees. And thirdly, we should clearly understand what kind of product we'll finally provide. And this product is a loyal, satisfied with qualitative medical service patient, and of course a loyal employee. And of course, for that as well, we start implementing Moscow standard of polyclinics. Practically 1 year of operation was spent for that in order to arrange a clear-cut concept which says that a unified standard is elaborated for the equipment in every building, unified standards for staff, some specific logistics. When the most popular rooms are located at the lower floors, and thus we come to this unification. And for that, in order for everything to be unified, we make capital repair. And now they actively say that 135 buildings of Moscow polyclinics should be going through capital maintenance, and including my clinics, which is located at Plushiha Street. Well, for these buildings to meet new equipment, in order to increase capacity, in order to get convenient and comfortable spaces, in order for our polyclinics to be suitable not only for patients but for doctors. And we keep on speaking about our employees. Lastly, we always speak about patients, but they should have comfortable conditions of work.
But not all the buildings corresponds to the goals that we have. And I'm sure that not just in the central region. We have, by the way, 2 offices in residential property, which have constructed back in the 60s. So they are not suitable for this purpose. They are not linked to proper electricity and water supply. But I think that there are a lot of polyclinics of this kind in Moscow. The one that you can see on the screen. So what could be a solution? We could build new type polyclinics. For example, the polyclinic at Большой Строчиновский переулок or street. It was take quite a while to build this polyclinic. Why? Because it is located in the central district. and there is not enough space, so that was very difficult to acquire a land plot and so on and so forth. But now we have a very good polyclinic that's completely in line with the international standards and our standards and requirements. But this is what Denis Nikolaevich said. We have quite a problem with its accessibility, especially for pedestrians. It is located within 1 kilometer, for example, from metro stations, and also it's quite far from another nearby polyclinic, and we need to do something about that in order to improve this accessibility. We are sometimes exposed to such difficulties, but there is always a way out, and we need to think how to work with that. Apparently, yes, on one hand, we want these polyclinics and all medical establishments to be absolutely accessible for all the pedestrians, yes, and to have them at quite, we want to have a polyclinic, as we call it, just around the corner, but it's not possible to implement it everywhere. We need to somehow, restructure our system in order to distribute our resources evenly so that we can cater to all the citizens, the whole population. How do we usually work with the population? I'm a municipal deputy, and very often I have to meet with our population, and we use all the possible methods of communication. We used also social networks. We have some regional communities. We also organized meetings with representatives of local authorities. We create working groups. We identify our challenges and try to tackle them. We try to persuade people and say that concentration of different specialists must be placed within one new, absolutely comfortable building, and there should be accumulation of all the specialties, specialists within one location. Everywhere. Yes, I have one more question, and probably we will go back to it a little bit. But a polyclinic that is location is a residential property like that, for example, on the first floor, etc. There are a lot of them, and now, of course, we are trying to offer to our Muscovites new polyclinics in order to have really good, medical establishments. And I absolutely understand what you were talking about. How can we change that? Could you also comment a little bit on that? But anyway, we'll have to go back to this issue later on. But I think right now we need to give the floor to the Perm region, and I would like to hear more about your experience, how you and how population takes something that is done by your. Thank you very much for such assessment of our regions. But before I start, I'd like to say that of course we have our own specific features. Just for you to understand, we have 2,600,000 people living there. We belong to the Privolzhsky Federal region. We have a whole length of the area up to 440 kilometers, and we should say that 1 million people lives within the Perm region. We have also 22 municipal cities, and at the same time the density of the population is a little bit less than 30,000, so it's very dispersed and distributed quite unevenly all around the territory. We have some central regional polyclinics and hospitals, and at the same time it is not accessible for many people, and they have to travel up to 160 or 180 kilometers to get there. We started thinking about that a long time ago. We know that so many of the buildings were built back in communist time, and people they tend to flee to big cities, but a lot of people remain in the region, and we want them to have access to high quality medical service. As for resource concentration, something that was mentioned by our previous speaker, yes, I should say that that we need to concentrate our resources in one place. I agree, but hence quite a few questions that it triggers. We have questions, for example, patients. Patients might ask, why do I have to go somewhere to get medical services? I want to get everything here and now, and previously I could go to for example, a hospital that was just around the corner, but now I have transported by a helicopter to be taken to some other new hospital somewhere far from there. And moreover, when we close some very local hospitals where they have only 5 specialists for this particular little area, and open a big new with all the specialists with this kind of concentration, we need to somehow explain to people why we do that. Yes, when we try to create these big clusters, we understand that people go out of their comfort zone, but at the same time we need to understand how efficient it is. We should say that it could at the same time help us to sort out many social problems or challenges that we have, because it could generate new jobs, workplaces, and it could create some social centers and so on and so forth. We have certain ideas to how it can be implemented further on in future. We have already started this work, and we have thought about many details, trying to understand what would be the most efficient approach to that. I've been listening very attentively to our colleagues. I think that we are on the same page, and we understand that a lot depends on how we personally structure our work. Our main efforts are put in creating a new approach where we really want to create one full-fledged center, even though that people, they don't want to leave their premises to get those medical services. We try to, on one hand, create probably some remote centers, but at the same time make those medical points a little bit closer to more accessible. Yes, we used to have 660 different medical establishments of different nature all around the territory. So this figure has been really decreased, but we of course understand that we cannot just dramatically decrease this number. We still will have some little medical stations somewhere, just in order to provide some primary service. We conducted a very thorough analysis to understand how it should be organized, and we are now expecting some further results to shape our work in the future. Of course, we also need to think how other parts of work should be structured. So we need to understand how to work with electronic recipes, with those medical histories that were also mentioned, these single databases. And apart from that, if, for example, when patient goes to such big centers, it's very important to make sure that such a patient gets all the possible services during one visit, because if a patient has to travel and to have a CT, for example, then to get a visit, an appointment with a dentist, then to go to a surgeon, etc., it's not possible. They cannot travel back and forth. We want to also incorporate it and make it an integral part of our structure. We also decided to have special shuttles in order to transport people from their house up to such a big medical centers, just in order to speed up the process and make this process more comfortable for them. To do that, we will have special tickets, let's put it this way, but this can be given by a local doctor. It's kind of a note that a patient is entitled to such a service. If we talk about medical organizations and main advantages of such mergers. I also heard it from my colleague. Yes, if we want to create it, we need to have a very trained specialists at every stage. And if we want to have high quality services, we still understand that it can only be found in big centers, because real professionals, high quality specialists, let's be honest, they would never agree to stay and to work on the other side of nowhere. Of course, they would need to be motivated, and they are more willing to go to work in such big centers with this concentration of all the services within one place. It's inevitable, and it means that we are gonna have some kind of big centers and some satellites or local medical stations that could work for us, on us as assistants, and we will think how to also consider all the possible players within this our system. So I would like to say that we have already discussed this approach with 147 organizations of different state organizations, hospitals, etc. And when I say that, I don't mean to say that we just invited small hospitals or companies to join the bigger one. No, it's a little bit different. We consider other factors as well. It's either based on a profile or accumulation and merger by profile, or for example by a certain geographical position. Methods could be different, but the main idea is to really think about it in a very thorough way, and to also remember about the need to explain to the population why we're doing this work and why it is so important. Thank you very much for your experience. I just wanted to ask you, let's give a round of applause. Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask you, how long have you been working on that? When you started to pioneer this work? As for the Perm region, we started this work in the second half of 2017, so we set certain goals, but even more important, speaking about this unification, we're all expecting some economic miracles, but it's not the first thing to happen. The first thing to happen is to understand that medical services can be rendered and provided in a more efficient way, but to do that we need to structure it properly. Today we talk about advantages and disadvantages, but what could be disadvantages from your perspective in this approach? You have been working with that, so if we talk about this consolidation, I mean those health factory, what could be disadvantages there, apart from the fact that we need to work with the population and explain them why we decided to do that. There is certain misunderstanding manifested by also medical specialists, and they also ousted from their comfort zone. And another disadvantage, we need to renew a little bit and to improve our database, especially when we proceed to such a merger. It's not possible to do that. We cannot just scrap something bad and try to create something even worse. We interact with different organizations on that matter, for example, with the Ministry of Transport. So this is the one that I mentioned about shuttles. It's important to interact with many people to understand. I would like to give the floor to Maria Denisovich on Nabernai Cherny. Could you please say a few words about your experience and how you provided medical services? Thank you very much. It's true that I'm here to represent Nabernai Cherny city. A few words about our city and the basic trends in the sphere of healthcare system. Last year we celebrated 50th anniversary from the point of view when KAMAZ, this car building giant, was established, and such a town with a population of 50,000 people. Initially that was the number of people living there, but then it's increased by 400,000 450,000 people. Initially, there were just people who came to that city, to our city, to build the commerce factory, but then it attracted a lot of people after that. We saw that 40 or 50 years passed, and then the population really aged and grew up at the same time, and medical trends changed completely. Right now we talk about oncological pathologies as well as cardiovascular. This is one of our main focuses. This year we are going to celebrate the 40th anniversary of the main hospital in the city. It was opened back in 1984, and then resuscitation unit was opened there, as well as some other departments, and now it is fit for 1,000 patients. But later on in 2000, the Republic of Tatarstan allocated over 3 billion ruble for the construction of the hospital, 1.9 billion for construction installation works, 1.2 billion for equipment and different hardware. And then the Republic understood that it's not enough just to change the appearance of the hospital. We also had to change the basic principles of medical services provided. We had to change the mentality of the staff. I will go back to it a little bit later. I just want to say that the hospital has really changed. A new profile appeared there, for example, X-ray, cardiovascular specialists. So this cardio cluster was formed. Also oncology department appeared. What are the main advantages in this sense? We should say that we have a lot of comorbid aged patients, and we need to take a comprehensive approach to them. And when we have, for example, a patient with a prostate cancer at very late stages, there are a lot of problems that where we need to sometimes install filters or do everything we can to avoid thromboembolia and many other things. And sometimes we have to perform dilatation or to think about some comorbid diseases like stenosis and so on. And some cases are very complicated, so they incorporate so many different challenges. And also we have to say that right now our hospital is the biggest one in the region, and patients they have different options. They can either go to the local little hospital or to go to the biggest one, and within 2 hours, with a short period of time, to get different service, CT and many other, to get all the results of the medical tests, etc.
Of course, it brings some complications and such a huge flow of patients and a huge number of multifunctionality, which truly result in the fact that we should implement other principles and approaches. And here we are similar to factories. Here we have systems of quality management. And here I get back once again to the trends that were arranged by our government and head of Republic of Tatarstan. The Republic was divided into 3 large clusters: Kazan cluster, the capital, our Kama cluster with the capital in Nabережные Челны, and Almetivo cluster, where we have oil refinery center, 3 large centers which are connected to territories. And as I have already said, there was a program arranged for training of a large time of employees for these centers in best foreign clinics for the purpose of benchmarking and the management of quality. And in 2012, for the first time, we had a service of quality management, and we go along ISO standard, but it was a universal standard which is applicable to factories and to plant and hospitals. But in 2013, for the first time, we faced such a standard as GCI, Joint Commission International, and these standards are used exclusively exclusively to medical institutions and help to provide safety of a patient. Why we're speaking about this? The more we have patients, the more intensive work we have, and the larger we become, the more diverse patients we have, the more multi-tasks we have, and here we should do quality control. A few words about GCI standard. It consists of two large parts. One of the parts is related to medical care, and the other one is management of medical organizations, starting from what kind of water is supplied to a hospital, how electricity and power supply is provided, fire extinguishing measures, and staff management. I would like to provide a couple of examples about the key standard, which is related to IPSG, or key targets for safety of patients. Today in hospitals we have all the standards implemented, but these are kind of most important part for medical care provision. The first one is identification. With such huge flow of patients, we should clearly understand that this patient will get the service of medical assistance. And today, every patient has identification bracelet where we have a name and number of medical history. Well, we moved from date of birth because, once again, an elderly patient cannot always remember date of birth, but the number of medical history is a universal criteria and 100% criteria of the point that we will really understand that we will confirm the personality of the patient, and he will get the necessary medical treatment. Today we move on, and no matter how strange it may seem, in 21st century we use this bracelet and train the staff to address patients by their name and patronymics, starting from the point that one of the patients told her experience being in different clinics in Russia, and in one of the hospitals she was called by her last name, and patient is and in other name they just called that this is a patient from Tatarstan. And patients are changing, there are new requests, and this bracelet helps not only to identify but also to clear the complete name, last name and patronymic, and create correct relations with the patient. All the patients wear white bracelets. Those who are allergic would have red bracelets, and those who have high risks of falling down would have a yellow bracelet. The second thing is critical condition information. Classical situation when a person is going through blood tests, identify high level of glucose, and when the story comes to a doctor, then this is a question. Unfortunately, you are pressed for time, and 2 minutes are too much. So if you have some questions, we'll get it back to you. And well, in Naberezhnye Chelny, there is the only hospital in Russia, the only state hospital in Russia, which is certified according to international standard. In Moscow, there is such a hospital, the only one, but it is private. And this helps not only to manage staff and quality of medical assistance, but it also helps to work with a foreign insurance company. For Moscovites, it's very important. Please pay attention. Vladimir Ivanovich, thank you very much. And Marat Fanisovich, thanks to you because you are so enthusiastic, and unfortunately we do not have time, but I wanted to ask how the staff treated all that, whether it was hard for them to switch to a new format. And I would like to give the floor to Lenara Hakimovna, Deputy Prime Minister of Bashkortostan government. And here we have a question about process of enlargement, results, experience, and I would like you to speak about some specific points and aspects. What's especially interesting? Thank you, Larissa. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. Well, probably I'm one of a few people being here who is not a doctor, and after Marat Fanisovich it's quite hard because he's very specific about medical aspects. And I would like to get back to Oksana Borisovna because Bashkiria can compete with the Perm region as to the size. 143,000 square kilometers, 4 million population. We're a large subject of federation. We have higher population density, 27 per 1 square kilometer, but the problems are actually the same. So that is why whatever is happening in large cities, even though we have 1 million 100,000 people living in Ufa, and others live in small towns or villages, and 37% live in a rural area. This is a high percent. Average in Russia, that is 25, just for you to understand. And in connection with this, well, please, the next slide. Well, all that actually puts a track on these processes. It's not in 2017 and not last year. It started with one-channel financing and a complete closing of medical objects in villages. And in this situation, our republic managed to sustain medical points. We have a three-level system of healthcare as well as everywhere in the country. You see this pyramid here. I understand that for other subjects it's not very interesting how many and is there. And I would like to say that I agree with the colleague that the solution to the problem with such huge distances, well, from Ufa to the farthest point of the region will take 600 kilometers. From north to south, it's 800 kilometers. So we solve this problem via mobile medical points. And this year we had a kind of health train which moved by 5 routes in the Republic, and we covered 104,000 people and identified almost 10,000 different diseases, including cancer diseases. And we managed to do this because we have created kind of teams. And these mobile complexes, including with mammographs, X-ray, and so on and so forth. And I would like to emphasize that it happens at the wave of special attention to healthcare, which comes from head of our republic. Every week he has 1 hour of healthcare personally, with the involvement of all the chief doctors of the republic and all the medical community. Actually, this is unprecedented attention, and we feel that, especially as considering finances which were directed to capital maintenance and equipment and also new staff and so on and so forth. Getting back to our theme, to the enlargement. So next slide, if I may. It's quite simple, but the idea is that, well, possibly centralization is overweighing, because first of all, this is competencies, an opportunity to provide efficient assistance, efficient medical care to a citizen. But I would like to repeat myself, sometimes we cannot do that. And even just elementary transfer of Clock-Round hospital, well, quite a recent case of rural hospitals when all the population actually protested. And now there was a question. He asked us to comment upon this, how you speak about this theme of enlargement with the population, and it's very hard. It's incredible, but sometimes we can play back the situation. And even the existing decree of Ministry of Healthcare has to be reconsidered, and it's very uneasy. And people insist, well, even though we understand that it's not efficient. And in my opinion, well, we should consider the situation somehow wider and get back to see whether medical insurance is truly efficient. If we judge by the target that was mentioned by head of our country from the point of view of demography, Mr. Graham from Great Britain. Well, just for a second, you in Great Britain, you do not have medical insurance, you have budget financing, and possibly we should think how efficient medical insurance is in Russia from the point of view that money is connected to the patient, and we have a narrow system of healthcare, even though it is really needed in some remote areas of big subjects of federation. It's quite a problem. And as to experience, well, the next slide, we have quite a lot of from distant technologies, here we have a chief doctor of our cardio hospital, Republican, Irina Evgenia Nikolaevna, logistic center. Well, all that is already implemented. As soon as we have 100% united by unified ambulance network, they will just fly. Even with the two pilot territory, Ufa and Ufa region, we could see for this January days, considered that the 1st of January 2020 we got new decree activated, we already see decrease in mortality rate. So results can be measured with days, and on a weekly basis we examine that. The next slide is related to oncology, and here, well, what the doctors could feel at places, possibility to attract different specialists, oncologists, chemotherapeutics, radiologists, and so on, and some specific pool of practices for local doctors when they have these telemedical consultations, and this is kind of training, and local doctors actually have typical situations, and finally they solve this or that complicated situations themselves. The next slide is related to ambulance, and I'll briefly speak about this. What was mentioned by Veronika about artificial intelligence is already becoming kind of practical things in one of dialysis center. Artificial intelligence with the addition of human intelligence that is obligatory. So finally, this is the doctor who takes the decision, but huge massive of data is used for most correct dialysis treatment, and we decided to spread it over other areas, and now we have working groups so that in oncology and cardiology this would be practiced. We arrange clinic and diagnosis laboratory. This is the next slide. Centralization, let us say, it's taking place, and sometimes it's truly hard, but it's out of the question that we have a direct efficiency, and even at small number or decrease of quantity of these laboratories, we can see a high efficiency of these processes. Our next slide, we have 1 minute left. So I can conclude it with a picture. With quality management, actually digital contour of healthcare is our strong part. We have these things arranged in a very proper way, and we already have digital medical histories, 4.5 million of digital medical histories, with 350 million cases of medical health provision, medical care provision, just to kill you with these figures. And the next picture is related to existing center of situation and project decisions of Ministry of Healthcare with the possibility of management, and quality management is not here, unfortunately. Well, Marat just made such a bridge for me to continue. Well, and I would like to conclude that what was said by Sergei Semyonovich Sobyanin and Veronika and the first speaker, I don't remember his name, during the plenary session, the colleague who was speaking in the plenary session. Well, finally, we need to change our idea of human health. And in my opinion, we should always be in the search of some interesting solutions. Actually, I'm a vice prime minister. I'm not Minister of Healthcare, and I watch this wider from the point of view of demography. And well, if I may, I would like to make an advertisement. On 28th and 27th of March, we'll have a All Russia Forum, which is called a Territory of Female Happiness. I invite all of you to this forum. We have it everywhere in all cities and regions. And there we have platforms for our children, for school children, on reproductive health. There are gynecologists, urologists, andrologists, and we just saw that we're losing reproductive health. Well, thank you very much. Well, we are really impressed. Thank you. I believe we'll visit you. And thank you. Thank you very much. Alexey Albertovich, you have the floor. And Khanty-Mansiysk Autonomous Region, what kind of plans to implement the changes and the role of coordinator? Well, see, this... Well, please speak louder. Yeah. So, dear colleagues, I'll try to be brief. When I was preparing for the speech, I wanted to share something and to surprise you with something, but I really want that to be interesting and to the point. The recept for health factory in Khanty-Mansiysk and Yugorsk, how it is implemented in the region, I would like to speak about 4 most important moments. The first part, or the first ingredient of that, is that we have preserved all the network of medical points in the region. Nothing happened to them in the last 20 years, and 95% they have doctors on constant basis, and they also have local general practitioners. So without this, no health factory would operate. And this is also specialized health high technologies in 4 large centers in the region. That is Nizhnevartovsk, Surgut, Nyagany, Khanty-Mansiysk, cities with towns with a population of 100,000, 200,000 people, 200 or 300 kilometers from each other. Well, first something new is tested, and if necessary, it is scaled. The third part, the third ingredient of this recipe is this sanitary aviation, and I would like to speak in detail about this. I will be the first one to provide figures. Khanty-Mansiysk Autonomous Region. This is 12 Moscow regions. As to the territory, we have 3 people for square kilometers. In comparison, there are 5,000 Muscovite people for square kilometer of the territory, and traditionally it's for 5 years. There are 4 helicopters and 1 airplane on duty the clock round, and more than 3,000 patients transferred, with an example of a well-known Khanty-Mansiysk village in Niksim-Vol, because Sergei Sobyanin was born here, so it is in swamps and in taiga. 724 dwellers are there, and there were 15 flights of sanitary aviations and 24 patients delivered, not to local hospitals, not to regional hospitals, but to the place where they can get final assistance, whereas the tomographer, where this treatment will start and finish at the same place. So this kind of approach is, maybe it's expensive, but in our opinion, it's truly efficient. And from this year, we have got 5th helicopter in another place for clock round duty, so that according to our calculations, we would have for 450 dwellers of the region, this territory for 4-5 hours of delivery would be shortened to 1 hour or 1 hour and a half. And we see that it's truly efficient, and it helps to preserve lives of our citizens. And the fourth, which I would like to mention, is about planned assistance, how to bring patient closer to this, how to provide assistance to the patient. And as an example, the Mansiysk hospital, regional hospitals, for 10 years, it works in kind of hospital, and the patients get assistance at daytime, chemotherapy, ophthalmology, and they live in a place. There are 225 positions, and it is always filled for the all year round, and it helps to efficiently load daily hospital and do not expand the clock year-round beds.
Just summarizing, I should say that the number of doctors in the city is very important. So concentration of high technologies in big centers is important. So the third point is sanitary aviation and optimum routing, control over our patients, just to make sure that they can be taken to the right location promptly, and also outpatient substituting units. I mean, different options as to where treatment can be provided. I should say that any health factory, whether it is somewhere in the region or if it's a regional big hospital, still we should have very clear goals that can be attainable. For example, we worked there's a project related to, for example, kidney transplantation. We performed 42 transplantation during the past 2 years, and also the same was done with liver. So I think that implementation of new approaches allow us to achieve such results. And I would like to remind you that there was such a brilliant Russian point, Yasnev, and that you cannot see everything when you zoom in, and sometimes you have to zoom out in order to see the big picture. Thank you very much. We still have some time left, and now I would like to give the floor to Alexei Shabunin, member correspondent of the Academy of Science, professor, and also representative of the healthcare department of Moscow, and one of the chief doctors at the Botkin hospital. Just very briefly, would like to show you a couple of slides for you. Our hospital celebrated 100th anniversary this year, and how it started. So when Kozma allocated some funds for establishing such a hospital, and now we're celebrating its 100th anniversary. Of course, it's very directly linked to the history of our country, and many of our leaders they have been our hospital, and I hope that our moderator Shaposhnikov he also will do a very good thing at the Duma, and we also have a chance to visit our hospital. Everything was fine, but then another medical reform was put into operation, and then another full hospital back in '92 was also joined our hospital, and there we had to understand how to work with those four different hospitals that became a part of our Botkin hospital, whether it should be integrated or not. So here you can see three main vectors that we have right now, directions. The first one is advanced training, implementation of technologies. I will just go briefly through the slides. This work that was accomplished over the past years. And one of the most important issues is implementation of modern technologies. Yes, we need to have the right sequence in place. Like the government said, first we need to focus on technologies and special training for our specialists. And yes, when we realized that we could provide a diagnosis very quickly, when we optimized the number of days that the patient had to spend in the hospital, then we realized that we could make another step forward, and also it could allow us to optimize the number of patient places within the hospital. We here have different departments. We have urology departments, obstetrics departments, and also orthopedic specialists. We have a big number of doctors working there, and I'm here to also represent the ophthalmology department together with Mashetov. We also have cardiovascular center, hematological center. We managed to decrease the number of lethal outcomes for myocardial infarction and also heart attacks, and could be now comparable with figures provided by our European colleagues. And the fact that we managed to accumulate so many different departments within one hospital allow us to really make a breakthrough. And we also have 1 year and a half managed to also start working with transplantation, and we also opened some new departments in the region thanks to our expertise. And over the past 1 year and a half, we performed 36 liver transplantations and 75 kidney transplantation, which, etc., you can see on the screen. Now we have 16 center of competence working for the whole Moscow, and also some federal entities, and that is what we are represented right now. We are still the most powerful hospital in the country. We have enough places for 1,800 patients, and also during 2019 we treated almost 108,000 patients. And in total, our number of patients amounted to 1 million patients. So we also performed a big number of operations. For example, we perform up to 70,000 operations per year, which amounts to 10% of the total amount of operations performed in Moscow. We have 24 different departments and cooperate with different universities in Moscow. And of course, it's not possible to achieve this goal without a functional approach, and we need to have something that kind in place in order to create those healthy factories. These are the figures that we achieved, and we're also willing to share it and project it onto Russia and other medical establishments. We also trained over 40,000 medical specialists on different fields of expertise. So I also provided advanced training for them, and the number, for example, laparoscopic intervention increased from 35% to over 70%. We also have some new approaches to the inpatient stay, so we also managed to optimize the way it is organized. And to summarize, I should say that big hospitals, this is the right trend, this is the paradigm of our today's life, and so they turn out to be the most efficient units. So thank you very much. Colleague, thank you much. I would like to thank each of you. I think that today we had quite a fruitful discussion. We shared our experience, exchanged our best practices, and the fact that right now we can have a new model for medical services to be provided, and to also focus on some individual approaches, but also to have the merger-based model allows us to create some centers of competences. When we create such clusters, of course, it's consolidation of best resources, of best specialists, which is really important. But we shouldn't forget about the fact that when we do our work, we also work to the benefit of our patients. And everything we do, we must do it together and jointly with our patients. We must discuss all the issues. Nikolai Filipovich, representative of Urgent Medical Service Station. Yes, thank you very much. I had 3 options and I could visit 3 different events at the same time, but I saw that Mr. Starodubov was on the list in this session, I had no doubts and I decided to join this one. So when we talk about such centers of competence and consolidation of hospitals, we also need to talk about emergency situations and urgent medical assistance. And for example, when we need to provide such services very, very urgently, if it takes a lot of time to reach patients. But right now we should say that in emergency situations today we can reach our patients within a period of 10 minutes, and our patients are taken to the hospital in case of, for example, a myocardial infarction very, very quickly within a period of 1 hour. But at the same time, it is more difficult to work with poor hospitals who can accept less patients, and they do not have as many opportunities as we have. And I think that if we have a decent transport system, then it could be done very efficiently. That's exactly what we're focusing. We need to optimize time that are needed for medical car to reach different destinations, and of course we need to optimize routing and to do it in a structural way. Thank you very much. I'm one of the heads of initiative group in the northern part of Moscow. Well, I quite agree with everything that was said, but let's be honest about the situation in Moscow, what we lack and what we really need. Yes, renovation is well underway, but even at this background, citizens are absolutely not aware of what is going to happen with different medical establishments within different regions. And that is why citizens have so many issues and questions. I have a kid with a Down syndrome, and I don't know how I will be living in this new era. If we talk about, for example, President's demographic program, we don't know what's going to happen with kids, whether they are handicapped or absolutely healthy kids. We talked about special programs with age groups, but still we don't know what's going to be done for them and how this program will be applied. And the third point, we know how, for example, metro system is developing. I absolutely agree with that. We know how infrastructure is developing, but we hardly know anything about healthcare system development up to 2025. We don't know anything about local initiatives or about initiatives taken about at this level. And if we had some brochures or materials provided for the citizens, so then they would be more aware of all those initiatives. I know that you are a very active parent and you participate in all the platforms that we have for our discussion. I'm really glad that you interact with medical specialists and attend different forums. In fact, well, it was mentioned today, it seems like we do everything we can, but for some reason information doesn't reach citizens. Well, seems like something that we're doing is not enough. We need to do more than that. We're running out of time, and I would like to summarize our today's discussion. We have a solution that probably could also be accepted by you. One of the main conclusions is that yes, we have a special trend in place that is now being implemented, where we are moving towards those new clusters, a big comprehensive cluster where everything should be unified within one digital format. And with the help of you, probably we people like you, we could also disseminate this information. We're ready to discuss that, and also within State Duma, and Alexei Valerievich mentioned that we're ready to interact. It could also be discussed with our representatives. You stay tuned, and you are most welcome to participate in our common work. Thank you very much for such a constructive and fruitful work. Thank you. Have a good day.